So, Neil, we decided that when we were talking about what we were going to do today, that you wanted to share your recent, you called it a Christmas Carol experience, right? Like an Ebenezer Scrooge, a little bit.
Basically, yes.
Okay. So, set the stage. How did this start? And this was what, like a week?
A week ago,
Yeah.
we can change.
Okay. And yeah, set the stage. Tell us kind of where you were at right before this happened.
Okay. Well, I got sick with pneumonia, which is a joy. I've never had that happen before. I've never had pneumonia before. Just thought it was the flu, just completely body aches, all the stuff. And I'm like, man, I really feel like I don't feel good. And it kind of got progressively worse. And then I think I called you or I was texted you and I was like, hey, can you come home? I really don't feel good. This is just, I don't know what's going on. So I went and kind of laid down in bed and just was feeling, I don't know, just really sick and kind of out of it. And this had been going on for a few days. I'd been, you know, kind of battling this for a while. But in the midst of this sickness, I think I kind of just got taken out physically
Mm-hmm.
and realized, had this, started having, I don't know, basically like a spiritual experience where I was like, could see just absolutely how much I depended 100% on God. Like having my physical health completely removed for momentarily
Mm-hmm.
to where like I couldn't do anything,
Yeah.
and just recognized just even basic things. I'm like, I rely on God for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it started this course of events and chain of events. And I felt like I had kind of a Christmas Carol experience where I was like shown my life,
Mm.
specifically like the last 10 years of my life. And I saw like how incredible it was. I mean, there have been a lot of things that have been challenging and tough, and I'm always like stressed or worried in different ways, but I just kind of saw it for what it was. I'm like, I've got this amazing family, I got these amazing kids, you're amazing. And I saw this almost scene set, but then I saw myself like on my phone, not paying attention, kind of like unhappy, disgruntled, distracted,
Mm.
and I was missing the entire thing. And it was like key time of our kids' lives. Like they're in the midst of their childhood. We're like full force child raising, family raising, like some of probably the best years for family. So
According
I'm
to my
told.
parents,
So all
these are
all
the
of
best
the
years.
all of our parents and older generations. Um, but I saw myself like missing this, and it was kind of like, you're gonna miss this, and
Mm.
you, and so I was kind of,
Not like you're going to pine for it, but like you're missing
you're
the whole thing.
missing like
It's
the
happening and you're not
core
there.
of the greatest family moment or experience. This time is really amazing and crucial,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like taken out, distracted on my phone. And so I saw myself in this visual, and I saw kind of what it was doing to like my kids, my relationship with my kids, and with you, my wife, um, and it was kind of like a little Ebenezer Scrooge, like kind of a hard vision to see type of a moment.
Mm.
And then I felt like I was just shown or told a few basic things to do. It's like, put your phone away. Just basically, very simply, put it in another room and just hang out with your family.
I saw you did that last night.
And so it's like, it sounds so unbelievably simple, but it's like powerful, just how
Mm-hmm.
incredible and how big of a difference that makes.
Yeah.
And then there were other things. I've just drank exuberant amounts of caffeine. And so I
Wait,
was,
let's be real about that. I would just talk about how that progressed into where you were at, because when this happened to you, you were at like the height of, I think,
I try
what
to
I've ever
keep it
seen.
like within a certain amount. I try and
Okay.
like like
But to
300
keep people
milligrams
300 milligram. Okay, to put that into perspective, a
of
Diet
caffeine,
Coke is like
like, I don't
40.
know, 40, like a 12-ounce can. So if you have like a 24-ounce Diet Coke, I like either way. But I mean, it was
It was
like
like energy
energy
drinks
drink, few Diet Cokes,
and
and
Crystal Light
then like
energy
a a Crystal Light is sparsed throughout, and kind of the
and
trickled
Che.
throughout the day, maybe some Shay in there, and then like if I got a headache or something, Excedrin migraine, which has caffeine in it, and it
Which has
just
a lot of, if I take
after
an Excedrin migraine, I'm like wired the rest of the
yeah.
day.
So after a while though, it just doesn't do anything. You just feel crappy all the time,
Hmm.
and that's kind of where I was at. I'm like, this is stupid, but I was told to stop, and I did. Just hard stop a week and a half ago, which for me is crazy,
Yeah.
but it feels good. And I don't miss it, which is weird. Like, I'm not like, oh, I really want to go get a drink or whatever. And then same goes for my phone. I mean, I think I just had this like fanaticism, st- still trying to get better. Fanaticism about like real estate and what's going on in the real estate market and houses and different things. And that was one of them. I'm like, real estate app, pulled that off. Cars, I love cars, looking at cars all the time. Boom, remove that, pull that off. That was another one that I was told to do. So small and simple things, but
Hmm.
the profound part of it was I saw what it was doing.
Well, I want to go back to something that you said that I think is very profound and that I've heard people say before. And what's interesting being in the recovery world, being surrounded by a lot of people who overcome addiction, it's interesting that I see kind of this like progression that a lot of addicts that I know and love go through where it's like they've got to get over that initial like that first, you know, I don't even know what you would call it, like the baseline, like the worst addiction, right? You take the first one and you just work on that and you don't worry about anything else. But then after they get, they've overcome that and they've gotten to a place where they can stay sober with that one addiction. Usually it's kind of this like divine discontent where after a while it's like God kind of pushes you to go next level. Like, okay, what's next? Like, what can you give up next? But the thing that I've heard that's a common thread between what you just shared and what I've heard people share in meetings is I didn't miss it. I didn't even miss it. Like, I've heard really wise people, specifically, I'm thinking of one friend of ours who is just like so wise. He's like one of my favorite people that comes to the meetings, but he's super wise. He's been extremely successful in his career. He's, just a man that I really look up to. And he was talking about how like sports was a thing that he was just obsessed with. And he would like buy tickets to NFL games, like miss church and go to those. And it was like this whole thing. And I'm not saying that like if you go to an NFL game on Sunday, you're like a bad person. I'm just saying that this is what I heard him share about. And that when he was like, he had worked on kind of like something else that he wanted to overcome in his life. And then after that, the next level that came, whatever, few years later, was the NFL Sunday, going to the games, the obsession with all of that. He was like, I realized that I kind of like you're saying, like the spirit told him, like, you need to stop or you need to like prioritize appropriately. And the thing that he said is like, I didn't miss it. Once I let it go, once I, cut that out of my life, I didn't miss it. And I think that's sometimes the most shocking thing is you cut something out of your life and you're like, wow, I don't miss it. This is embarrassing, but I feel that way with Grey's Anatomy.
Me too. I don't miss it.
I know. Well, I think if we're like super honest, you kind of liked it sometimes.
Nah,
But
not
listen,
to a
I
fault.
had a thing where I had seen every episode. And then I don't know, a couple years ago, I was just like, this is such a waste of my life. And it sucks up so much of my time. It's not wholesome. It's not uplifting. I don't need to watch this. And so I just quit and I don't miss it. There's not any part of my life that's like, wow, I was a better person when I was watching every episode of Grey's Anatomy that came out.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's important to note, like, this is just where I'm at in my journey. This is just my experience.
Right.
It's not like in different stages of my life, like if that was the worst I was doing, I would have been doing pretty
Amazing.
dang good.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, so it's God, I know God works with us where we're at. And so
Yes.
particularly where I'm at and what I'm personally needing to work on, I just want to share this experience. But whoever's listening could be at like, look, I'm just trying to stop using heroin every day, or cocaine or whatever. It could be something big or small, or maybe it is a small thing. So, it's all kind of based on your own progression. But just for me, this was my
Mhm.
experience and what I was counseled to do. But there was a quote that just stuck in my mind and was just ringing in my mind. And it was from our prophet of our church, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, President Nelson. And he gave this talk called Think Celestial, basically like think more in terms of eternal perspective and we're going to live
Mhm.
past this life. But he says this, and this quote, it just kept playing with such clarity as I was having this experience.
Mm.
Um, he said, as you think celestial, you'll find yourself avoiding anything that robs you of your agency, any addiction, be it gaming, gambling, debt, drugs, alcohol, anger, pornography, sex, or even food, offends God. Why? Because your obsession becomes your God. You look to it rather than to Him for solace. If you struggle with an addiction, seek the spiritual and professional help you need. Please do not let an obsession rob you of your freedom to follow God's fabulous plan. But that part, just I could hear his voice. It was just like any addiction, anything that keeps you from feeling the spirit of God or connected from God,
Mhm.
like eliminate that from your life. And it just kept playing with such force. It was just really a powerful part of the experience.
Well, and the obsession part is what's really interesting being married to someone who's a recovering addict. Like the way my brain works and the way your brain works is very different. And I would tell you sometimes like it's weird. I see you on your phone and I can see, remember I told you this shortly before this happened and I'm so careful about the feedback I give Neil because I've worked so hard to have my own recovery from codependency. So I try to really check myself if I feel inclined to say anything to him about like taking your inventory or, keeping my side of the street clean and not trying at all to manage you in your recovery. But there's some times where I feel the spirit like kind of pushing me, like you should say something. And on those occasions, I try to listen. And there have been, couple times here and there where I've been like, I don't know if you realize this, but I see that same like look in your eyes of obsession when you're like looking at the, Redfin app or the car trader, whatever it's called, um, the car app,
Auto
Auto
Trader
Trader.
app.
Thank
It's
you.
not an ad for Auto Trader, by
No,
the
it's
way.
not.
Absolutely not.
Um, well, we're talking about how you got off of it, so
Exactly.
definitely that's like like
Don't do it.
like the demotivators.
Yeah.
But that I just kind of saw that like turn on where I could see it was kind of like I check out of the world
Yeah.
and do
That's what it
that.
was too.
Yeah, and it was funny too. I felt a couple of times that like I felt God telling me that I needed to share with you that I really felt that there's things that we've gone through that are like he's trying to teach us to appreciate what we have and not just be obsessed with like what could be better, what would make you happy, what would make us happy, like what would like if I had this happy life or this like ideal perfect life, what would it look like? And it was just interesting because you came to me and said like these things that you know like God spoke to you were the same things that I've said a couple of times. And it was actually hard for me to say those things the two or three times that I said them. Maybe, I don't know if it was twice or three times at the most, but, you know, spaced out by several months or whatever. But every time I kind of like gently suggested or brought this up to you, it was hard because there's so much of me that's like, nope, that's not I'm not in charge of Neil. That's not my job. I don't manage his recovery. But there's a difference between like, let you do you and I do me. And then we're married and we are the parents of these beautiful children that we're in charge of. And if I feel like the Spirit's like, nudging me, it's actually like a little more chance. It's funny. It's like the opposite of what it used to be, where I had to hold back and I had to like practice holding my tongue when I wanted to tell you what to do or ask you questions or be all in the middle of your stuff. And now when those things come, I have to push myself. I have to remember, like, okay, extremes on either end are not good. And it's still important for us to be united as a couple and for me to tell you things when I'm feeling things. And so for me, it was cool that you came to me and had that revelation, because it was a confirmation to me that I wasn't crazy, that when I had those little promptings, that they were real. Because, anytime you and I have like the same or very similar revelations or downloads from God, it's like, wow, that's a confirmation to me that that was real.
Yeah. And that is the truth, really. It was kind of funny coming out of this experience. I'm like, wow, these are the exact same things Corinne has been and you're always right. Like, it's just in our marriage with a lot of like the spiritual things. Um, like it'll take me a minute to work through the process, but I'm like, oh man, Corinne's right. Like, she's spot on with this. And it was the same here. Like, I mean, I think for a long time I played it off. I'm like, whatever, like it's not a it's not a big deal. Like, if this is the worst I'm doing,
And it's
like I'm
actually
doing,
not, it's not a big deal.
it's not, but the way that I was shown and the effect that it was having and
Mm,
how I saw it, I was like, whoa, this is a huge deal. And I see it. And it like is disrupting my connection with God because I'm obsessing. And I feel like that's really what it is it's like needing to have something to obsess over with this concept or idea that there's something externally
mm-hmm,
that if I can obtain, get, have, experience, or whatever, that it's going to fill me up with whatever happiness, joy, fun, good feelings. And like, even when you get some of these things, maybe there's initially it's like reasonable stuff or whatever, like it's super momentary, super fleeting, but then it's more about the obsession to where it's like then you need something else to
mm,
obsess over and to like and it's like it is. I think it's a trap. It's a for sure becomes something that you're using to check out just this concept or idea of some thing or some external that's going to make life feel a certain way is controlling your life and taking you out of the things that you actually are real and that actually matter. And
mm-hmm,
really at the end of the day, probably whatever the thing is you're obsessing about, at least for me, like really doesn't even matter. Like, it matters, like, yeah, you need a house or yeah, you need a car or whatever. It's fun to have stuff or an activity or bikes or whatever to go ride. But like creating an obsession to where you always need like bigger and better and more in order to like that is the addiction. Like that's the trap of it. And I feel like
mm-hmm,
that's mentally where I was, and I was using it as a coping mechanism just when things were stressful or hard or frustrating.
mm-hmm.
It was kind of like that song, I think of my favorite things and then I don't feel so bad, from Sound of Music, kind of like that song. Like, but literally that was what I was doing.
And this has been an interesting thing for me to learn too, being married to an addict, that like my mind doesn't work that way. I'm kind of the opposite, where like life gets stressful and I'm like, work harder. And that's not necessarily the right thing
I
either.
wish I was more like that, by the
It
way.
well, it's just a difference where I've had to learn to understand that your stress response is different than mine and that your brain works differently than mine. And yeah, I've seen a lot of progress from like when we were first married to now. Cause I feel like when we were first married, there was this like fantasy of like, you would talk about it all the time, like, oh, if somebody just gave me like $1 million. And then, XYZ, you'd talk about like what you would buy or how that would solve life's problems or whatever.
It's addict thinking.
Yeah, I feel like that you've kind of graduated from that. I don't hear a whole lot of that anymore. And I think some of that is acceptance, like accepting reality that you have to do that if you're going to stay sober. really accepting the world around you as reality. But then I also think it's, you know, like God kind of pushed you to level up here, but you had to be here to level up. And I think the here for you was living this sober life where you've had to go from like numbing out your entire life to, that kind of higher ground of living life on life's terms. And even though there was some like, checking out with, like we just said a minute ago, it's not that big of a deal. Um so in order for you to go even like one step higher, you had to get to the point where you could even just live life on life's terms. And I think there's a big like misunderstanding about when an addict is trying to overcome their addiction, what it takes to get from every time something hard happens, I check out, to now I live life on life's terms. Like, talk about that for a minute and what that's like as far as what it's taken for you to even be able to baseline deal with life, you know,
Yeah.
not numbing out with something that's like a pretty hard hitting, you know.
Yeah. Well, there's a quote that I really love, um, that's from the Big Book, and I don't know if I can find it. Maybe I'll come circle back around to it. But it's basically this. It's a story from the Big Book of this doctor, and it's crazy. He gets all into sedatives and alcohol, and eventually goes through the recovery process. But he comes to this epiphany where he's like, acceptance is the answer.
Mm,
Acceptance is the answer to all of my problems.
yeah.
And he basically says, anytime there is something in my life that I'm displeased with or I don't like, I'm basically mocking God's handiwork. Like, everything in my
Mm,
life is because God put it there. And if I'm not accepting that or pushing against it, then I'm not accepting God and his processes.
mm-hmm.
And so, and I agree with that. I think if I'm striving to do what's right and I'm striving to follow God, and my life looks the way that it looks, I mean, it looks pretty amazing. Like, and that's part of this vision that I was shown, is like, you have an incredible life and
Yeah.
you're missing it. But I think just the way that my brain works and the addictive brain works is you're just not seeing it, or there's things that you just can't control, and you want to control everything in your life. You want to control people, places, things, circumstances, situations. You want bad things to be good. And then if things are good, you want to take it to the next level and be like, let's make it cooler. Like, how can we make this more awesome? And it's, instead of just being grateful. And I think that this experience, a big part of it was recognizing just how much comes from God, like everything.
Mm,
The only thing that we have really is choice,
mm-hmm.
agency. Everything comes from God. And I think that the way that the world currently works with technology and ease and convenience and personalization to the nth degree in everything you can possibly think of, it gives this illusion of control. It
Mm-hmm.
makes you
I am the
think,
master of my own life.
I control everything.
Yeah, yeah.
I can make a phone call, I can get on an app, I can get online and get whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want it. And like, it just requires money, or it just require, or if I have this or whatever, like, but I think we are living in, and there's a really cool talk about it, that someone references this from our church, but um just references this idea, like the danger of that, and recognizing we can get proud and be prideful about it, and kind of replace the need for God with all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, accepting life's on life's terms is recognizing that fact, being grateful, and understanding where it actually all comes from. And
Mm-hmm.
it all comes from God.
Okay, so I'm going to push you a little farther though, because what happens, like that all sounds great. And I see that. And I think that's a really great way to approach life day to day. My question is, what do you do then at the next really stressful crossroads in life where it's like, oof, like this was really hard or this is really uncomfortable and you have to sit with it. So when that like urge to check out and go to a fantasy land comes, like what do you do instead?
Well, and this is where working a program really comes into play for me. Um, in short, surrender, to where it's just recognizing probably if there's a stressor of that magnitude, it's recognizing the unmanageability. There's probably something in that stressor that's like, I can't control or I can't do anything about.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think what helps me is like the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. If I can like internalize that, that's how the surrender process works for me. But it does. Life is designed, and it's by design to push you hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like even knowing this stuff, being in the moment, it's really hard. And you're like, I just want to break. I don't want to sit and have to keep looking at this problem or thinking about this problem. Like, I just want to take a break from it. And I just want to feel not pressured and not stressed for a minute. And I think that's where, for me, I could slip into like I just need something. Give me
Mm-hmm.
like a cool house to look at or a fun car to look at or think about or imagine, whatever that scenario or what it would be like or whatnot. And it's a tool to check out momentarily,
Right.
but it's doesn't help you. And from what I was shown in this vision, it's pretty negative.
Yeah. And I mean, I shared this with you a couple months ago, but I try to ask our kids hard questions like, give me feedback. Have I done anything to hurt your feelings recently? Um, you know, I'll ask them kind of hard questions. And I asked them a couple months ago, I had my girls in the car, I think just the older two. And I said, do I ever make you guys feel like I'm not paying attention to you or I'm on my phone too much or I don't care about you? And they both were like, no, mom, you don't know. And then they said, but when dad, when dad's on his phone, he's just looking at cars or he's just looking at houses and um, he doesn't want us to bother him. And I felt like the sadness of there isn't anything inherently wrong with looking at a house or looking at a car. But that sadness that like our kids felt like you cared more about that than them, that's obviously not true, but that's how they're interpreting that situation. And so that I think is the danger that like you aren't necessarily doing something bad, but you're replacing something that's neutral or kind of okay, good with something that's so precious and important that you can't get back. And so that I think um, I saw a total difference last night when I like walked in and I think I walked downstairs for something and your phone was sitting there on the counter, but then you were upstairs with the kids. And there's just a totally different connection going on there when you're just there and there's nothing in between the two of you or the five of them,
Yeah.
however many there
No,
are.
it is. And I think and I saw it. And I see it now too. I'm like, wow, my kids are so amazing.
They're
Like
fun.
they're fun, they're
Mm-hmm.
funny. Like it's just I've I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of a new level of like, wow, I can't believe that I was missing this. So I'm grateful for every
So,
experience.
so now when something hard happens and you have that like urge to just, okay, I just don't want to think about this. What now what?
I mean, I'm hopeful that I can remember enough about this experience. And really what it came down to was and anyone you talk to who goes through something, and not that this was like some really it was a profound experience for me, but it like wasn't as profound of other experiences that you hear. But when people come out of them, they all kind of say the same thing. They're like, wow, none of the things that I was focused on actually matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just my family. That's the only thing that really matters, or my faith, or like the key things that we all
Relationships.
kind of know,
Mm-hmm.
but just due to the distractions of the world, you just get caught and it just seems so big and important, all this other stuff. So in those moments, I hope I can boil it down and be like, look, this is all that matters. And, like, yeah, if I don't know how much time I have, like, hopefully I have a long time.
And this had Dave written all over it, by the
Yeah.
way. This
And
I
I'm
told
I'm
you that
sure
that
there was a
like
part of my this that my I there was other things that happened that I can't remember, and I think maybe there was something in there with Dave, but it was like if I don't know, I've got months or a year or a couple of years, whatever, like none of the stuff, like 90% of what I'm concerned about is not going to matter at all. There's only like a 10% component of like love and service to my family and to the people that are in close proximity to me relationship wise that I can affect and they can affect me.
Mhm.
That's really all that matters. And obviously God is going to be at the top of that list, but like I think understanding and seeing life from the right perspective and in the right prioritization to where these stressors, these life things that are always going to be there, they don't get so big that they just completely take over your vision, which a lot of times is what happens.
Mhm.
And when that happens, it's like, get me out of here. I need something, you know, and that's how addiction happens.
Mhm. Well, I just want to stress too again that you already had made so much progress and that you were in a good place. This wasn't like, wow, you were in a horrible place and like this was some big come to Jesus. But I say that because I think sometimes the there's danger in a comfort zone, like if it's a little too comfortable and a little too familiar and easy and you aren't feeling pushed at all, then you're also not progressing at all. And so these like next level, like these little level up challenges that God puts into our life are they're uncomfortable and it's hard, it's hard to change, but it also to me is an indicator that he trusts us. Like, okay, I think you're ready. You're ready for this next level. And then the coolest thing is when you are able to look at it and go, I don't even miss it.
Yeah. And I think he does. I think God gives you the grace to do it if you're
Mm-hmm.
ready for it. And I think, and there's a scripture, like it's in the Bible, it's in the scriptures, it talks about like who God loves, he chastens.
Mm.
And so I think that and I think it was a chastening moment, but it's different. It's not like shameful or you're a bad person. It's just, it's loving, but it's like, it was clear. It was like, this is what is happening. This is what it looks like. And just so you can see it. And I think I was comfortable in my dailies. I was comfortable in what I was doing, but I was still relying on crutches and relying on things that were completely skewing my perspective on life and creating scenarios that really, at the end of the day, just created a lot of unhappiness, ironically, because, you're going after something that you think is going to be, bring more happiness or fun or joy or whatever. And it doesn't.
There's some really good quotes from A Christmas Carol, like the actual Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol.
Wise,
So wise, so
very
good.
wise words.
Um, this is what one of Scrooge's interactions was quoted from in the book. Wow, that was really bad English. This is what it says in the book about that interaction. Scrooge says, "You are fetid," said Scrooge, trembling. "Tell me why." "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on my um I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it." And I think that sometimes we just go through life and it's just like, oh, life just happens to me and I just deal with it. And there's like some accountability and responsibility for like, no, nobody makes you do these things that you do. Like it is your life that you have created. And so do you like it? That's something that I try to challenge myself all the time to go like, okay, am I happy with the way that I'm spending my time or living my life? And there's little adjustments that like the stupid Grey's Anatomy thing where I'm just like, am I really living the life on purpose that I want to live? Or am I creating these like chains that are holding me back from the person that I would like to become?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is. I know there's a lot of recovery books that talk about that, like it's an inside job, like it's us that creates this
Mm.
for whatever the reason. And there's, all kinds of origins of how that happens and family stuff and trauma that creates these thought lines and these ways of thinking and coping. But if I had something to do with getting into it, then it would make sense that I have something to do with getting out of it. But it does require God. It really does. I mean, even something as small as, for me, like caffeine has always been a big thing for me,
Yes.
or any of these things, like even like Redfin or Auto Trade or whatever. Like you get used to these crutches, you get used to these things, or even just your phone, whatever, just having it on, checking it all the time, it becomes a massive crutch. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it to a point where you don't realize how tough it is until you try and just do it without help. Then you realize, wow, okay, maybe this is an addiction. And it does it requires God.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is when he's involved and when you're legit about honestly wanting to do it with a real, sincere heart and real intent, you receive the grace. And then it is that moment of like, I really don't miss it. And I
Yeah.
don't.
Hold on. We're recording a podcast. Oh, okay. Give me 90 seconds, okay? Go get your water bottle ready. Okay, just to end, this is my actual favorite quote from A Christmas Carol. This is when Scrooge is talking to Jacob Marley, his former business partner, and he's like, "You did great in life." He goes, "But you were always a good man of business, Jacob," faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. "Business," cried the ghost, wringing his hands again. "Mankind was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The deals of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business." So I think in this, especially going into the holiday season, being thankful, and then the Christmas season and all of that, like really remembering like what is our business in this life? Going back to your, focusing on what was the talk again?
Think celestial.
Think celestial is just like, what is the point of this life? What is your business? What do you need to accomplish here? The charity, the relationships, connection, that is the currency of life. Thanks so much for listening to Mint Arrow Messages. We're so grateful that you spent time with us today. Make sure you go follow us at Corinne Stocco or at Mint Arrow Messages on Instagram. And then if you have a second and you love the show, I would love it so much if you'd leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts. That's the only way people can find out about us if they haven't heard about us before. So just go tap the stars, leave a rating or a review. If you have a second, we would appreciate it so much.